Let's get this party started.
What you laughing at?
A whole Lord of the Rings movie. Man, forget y'all.
I'm telling you.
I've never actually seen
half a school day.
Yeah. Well, I ain't got nothing to say to that. Let's go ahead and get our introduction into this whole thing. Dred Scott, let's go ahead and get an introduction. It's 3 minutes, so try to get as much information as you possibly can get in, because it's a whirlwind of information just at the beginning. And there are some things that you're going to get lost on. And I'm probably speaking for myself, because somebody else will listen to it and go, I understood the whole freaking thing. But just try to keep up with all the moving parts.
Let's get into it. The year, it's 1846. The United States is 15 years away from full-blown civil war over a number of divisive issues, chief among them, slavery. The North was like, slavery is bad. Like, we're still mostly racist, but at the very least, people shouldn't be owned, I guess. And the South is like, it's all right as individual states to decide what we want, and what we want is to own people. And everyone is mad. And in 1846, this hasn't reached a boiling point yet, but it was well on its way. At that time, the state of Missouri was very into slavery. And in the West Wing courtroom of the old St. Louis courthouse, an enslaved man was fighting for freedom for himself and his family. That man was named Dred Scott. But let's back it the fuck up a bit. How'd we get here? Dred Scott was a man born into slavery around 1799 in Southampton County, Virginia. He was the legal property of a man named Peter Blow. In 1818, when Dred was about 19 years old, the Blow family moved to a farm near Huntsville, Alabama, with their 5 other enslaved people. By 1830, they had run out of resources as their farming business never took off, so the Blow family moved to St. Louis, Missouri to run a boarding house. This guy Peter had 7 kids, 4 sons and 3 daughters, who all married into prominent Missouri families. They worked in business, politics, and law. This is an important fact for later. Around 1832, Peter Blow died, and Dred Scott was sold to a U.S. Army doctor named John Emerson. As part of his work in the Army, Emerson moved around a lot. In the early 1830s, they moved to Fort Armstrong in the state of Illinois. At that point, Illinois had outlawed slavery. In 1837, they moved to Fort Snelling, which is located in what is now the state of Minnesota. In fact, it's about 20 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now. And the room I'm in was built about 50 years after this took place. History. Cool. Anyway, Fort Snelling at the time was located in the U.S. territory of Wisconsin, which also was a free territory, meaning no slavery allowed. While at Fort Snelling, Dred Scott met and fell in love with 19-year-old Harriet Robinson. She was also enslaved by a guy named Lawrence Taliaferro, who was an army officer and justice of the peace in Fort Snelling. He officiated the marriage of Dred Scott and Harriet Scott and gave Harriet to Dred Scott's enslaver, Emerson, so that the couple could be together. Aww. Okay, but don't go feeling nice things about old Lawrence. All right, he owned 20 other humans, so not a good person, but like to do little nice deeds once in a while to feel good about himself, you know? Cute. Anyway, so Dred and Harriet are married in a free territory after Dred had spent years with Emerson traveling around free states and territories. Interestingly, because of various treaties, Dred could have sued for his own freedom while he was actually in those other territories. A lot of historians like to note the mystery of why he never did sue while he was in the actual free territory, but disenfranchisement runs deep. He couldn't read or write, and the legal system was even more exclusionary then than it is today. Sure, yeah, I've been held in bondage my entire life and told I'm subhuman. Let me climb up these court steps and sue my white enslaver. This was a process that many enslaved people went through, but the barriers to entry were huge. So I find it kind of victim-blamey, all the historical accounts I read where people are like, what a mystery that it took him so long to sue. Anyway.
I appreciate her last point, man, because I personally haven't heard that, but I know it's out there because you hear people saying, ends justify the means and all this other crap that racists say. I appreciate her saying that because, it's true. My man was enslaved, okay? not a lot of options. In fact, the only reason he could even sue was because white abolitionists decided, hey, we'll pay for this so that we can make a point and fight for the larger issue, which is slavery. Like, this is kind of like weird transition, but like when Anna, when you were talking to me about the Palestinian family, and I gave you that particular pushback. It's a similar dynamic. It's very important to the individual that you're representing in court. But the reality is, you're not doing this for that person. This person is a convenient tool to be able to fit within your larger objective, and it'll mean the world to the individual that you're trying to help, if you can help. But that's not the thing. You're fighting for a bigger thing. But I do say that to one, illustrate that point, but then two, for people to understand that America it's pretty jacked up, all right. But there have always been people outside of the local group that help, right? Like, slavery would not have ended, just at least not the way it did, if it was just us. There were people who cared, who didn't have a quote unquote vested interest in caring. And I think that's important to keep in mind, because generally speaking, the white population of America breaks about 60-40. Right? You got 40% that's horrid and they vote their own narrow interests, and they've been doing it since they got here. And you got about 60% that kind of give a damn here and there. And when you can see where they start to hit loggerheads, that's when minority groups, I said that backwards. The 60 is the people who don't give a damn, the 40 the ones that do. Most of them are fucked up. And it's not because they potentially are aggressive towards minorities per se. They're just very aggressively forward their own interests. But that's why you can end up with a situation where minority groups can play that other 15-20%, push it over the edge, and we actually have a real process. So anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
I'm not going to put my 2 cents. It's really short. It's disheartening and it's so sickening when I was listening to the story the first time. Now I'm listening to the story the second time, to just hear you're passing a human being off as if it's a horse or a car. Like, it was a point in there where the doctor was leasing them out. Like, what am I listening to?
You're listening to the realities of America, my brother.
Yeah.
We still do it to this day.
It's so mind-boggling that was norm.
It's still the norm.
Can I borrow your human? I know it is.
Yes.
I know it is. Can I borrow your human? That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Oh, I don't need this one. This one, I don't really need her to do any work, and they make a cute couple. Yeah, you go ahead and take her.
And
you're breaking up slightly here and there.
Of course I am.
Did you just call on Anna?
I called on Anna. Well, I got a chance. Agent Johnson don't like these subjects.
One of the things that I did was look at how the states were added one by one in the order, and who was making their decision while the Dred Scott case was going. So she said it started in 1846. We had all the way up to Florida done. We even had Texas in 1845, but in 1846, Iowa was added to the Union. 48, Wisconsin. 50, California, and then in 58, Minnesota. There was the whole needed to add states equally, slave state, free state, and the Missouri Compromise, and it just sorry, my dog is chewing on a ball really loud right beside me. It helped me see Dred Scott's movements where he was up, with the Wisconsin Territory, Illinois, and I know we're gonna get into it, but the whole question of, well, if an enslaved person comes into a free state or passes through, does that change anything legally about them? I was trying so hard to think, well, what was it like? What were the conversations? They must have been wild to my sense right now. Everybody that says, no, systemic racism, it's not a thing. Please pay attention to what Chief Justice says.
Yeah. And there was also a while with that, like you were just saying, like the discussions that might have been happening. It's these mentalities have not changed. These same mentalities are here. They have not shifted. They're just as entrenched as they've ever been. They always find their way into seats of power, and they always debate the facts around the facts. Okay, you're debating if a person who is enslaved moves from this state to that state. Well, if they're enslaved in this state, and then they go into this state, are they not enslaved? And then when they go to this state, all this debate is ridiculous, because what it really comes down to is a bunch of men sitting in a room debating everything except for the fact that these people are enslaved. Debating everything around. That's why it's like I can't give. I got to kind of cut to it, man. Like these people, almost cursed. They're just evil. They're devils. Okay, like I know people don't like when people call white people devils. No, I'm not calling white people devils. I'm saying that you look at a thing and you judge it by its actions. That's how you define what it is. I look at a snake. It looks like a snake. It acts like a snake. It's a freaking snake, right? If you're acting devilish, you are a devil. And debating which stop on the railroad line renders someone no longer a slave, but not debating the fact that the person's enslaved, or that his children are enslaved, or that his wife is enslaved, or that he is still enslaved while you were fighting about this for 15 years. Right? Debating, well, if as we add states because we want to expand the nation, we got to go 1 for 1, because if we don't go 1 for 1, we're going to end up going to war. So we want to avoid war. So we avoid war. That means if you add a slave state, we got to add a free state. We add a slave state, we add a free state. Right. That's how we do it, so we don't have to fight each other.
That was the Missouri Compromise.
Right? And then you get to the point where, like, well, man, things keep going, and I'm not winning, so we're just gonna fight. Still, we like to say that the Civil War is about slavery. Not especially. Slavery was a factor. What it really was about was economics and power. The South didn't want to give up slavery, because that was their means of economics and power and superiority. The North wanted to get rid of slavery because they wanted to move into a more international basis of doing their trade. And the rest of the world was like, we don't do that anymore. So, what's it? I'm just glad, every time I drive by the Confederate cemetery that's like less than 2 miles from my house, I always look at it, yeah, curse every last one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You have anything else to say, Anna?
No, just this was my preparation, was to look up the order of the states and get a good sense of where he was. And the basis of his legal argument.
All right, let me go ahead and play the next video while I have internet. Not rushing, just I know the internet is going in and out, so I apologize in advance. It's going in and out today because Agent Johnson don't like subjects like this. So, going to trial.
In 1837, Emerson was transferred from Fort Snelling to Louisiana, but he left the Scott family behind in Fort Snelling to lease them out to other officers. While in Louisiana, old Emerson, he meets and marries Eliza Irene Sandford. Eventually, they were reunited with the Scotts up in Fort Snelling, and then they all moved back to Missouri in 1840. You'll remember, Missouri is a slave state. Anyway, Emerson suddenly dies in 1843 at the age of 40. The official cause of death is consumption, but rumor has it was syphilis. Emerson's widow Irene gets his estate, so she leases out the Scots' labor for the next 3 years. At this point, Dred and Harriet have 2 girls, Eliza and Lizzie. In 1846, Dred tries to purchase freedom for himself and his family from Irene, but she was like, nah. That ain't happening. And so that same year, Dred starts the legal proceedings that would eventually lead to the Supreme Court decision that we're talking about today. The first case Scott filed was in Missouri State Court, and he relied on the long-standing Missouri judicial standard known as once free, always free. The standard allowed slaves who were taken to places where slavery was outlawed to then be freed, even if they returned to the slave state of Missouri. His wife Harriet filed a separate lawsuit for her own freedom as well, and the 2 lawsuits were later combined into one that represented the whole Scott family. They were assisted in the initiation of their suit by a guy named Francis Murdoch, a white attorney who filed nearly 1/3 of all freedom lawsuits in St. Louis between 1840 and 1847. He initiated the lawsuit and paid the fees necessary for its initiation. He relied on the once free, always free judicial standard, which again was long-standing and well-established by numerous court cases, all the way up to the Missouri Supreme Court that allowed enslaved people to sue for their freedom and win. He likely would have told the Scots that they had a strong case. It met all the requirements. The problem is that the judicial standard no longer reflected judicial and social attitudes about slavery by the mid-1840s in Missouri. Remember, we're 15 years away from the Civil War, but things are already boiling over. Between 1844 and 1846, 25 freedom lawsuits were filed in state court in St. Louis. Only 1 had resulted in freedom. Murdoch moved to California before the Scots case went to trial, and at this point, for reasons that are still unknown, the Blow family, that original family that owned Dred, remember? The guy Peter, he had 7 kids. Yeah, and his kids started getting involved and supporting the Scots suit. It's thought that Charlotte, one of his daughters, was the matriarch in the family and persuaded her brother-in-law, a prominent lawyer named Charles Drake, to assist the Scots on their case. And then when Drake moved away, Charlotte got the attorney for the Bank of Missouri to represent the Scots. Charlotte's husband, you see, worked at the bank, which is the only apparent connection that would make sense for this random bank lawyer to have gotten involved in this case. I point this out to again highlight the many hurdles that enslaved people had to overcome to get a freedom case brought to court. That the Scots were able to initiate their cases was due in part to their tenacity and bravery, but also in part to a community of people who helped. A lot of stars had to align for this case to have even started.
Yeah.
That last sentence, and I'm gonna bring you to thinking about George Floyd. The stars have to align for the black person to get justice. Okay? Luck has to happen in order for you to get close to justice, and then the outcome is still uncertain.
The thing that sticks out to me in that last one, it was at the very beginning, was you have the laws, your laws on the book. once free, always free. And yet I'm with Thea's on this, is that during that time, these times, anything else, man is gonna man. And although the law is right there in front of you, the ones that you wrote in black and white, but I'm not feeling it. I know what I wrote, I know what I said, but no, I'm not feeling that. 20
Somebody else wrote that.
25 cases. You won 1 out of 25. Just because you ain't feeling. And it probably is what this is saying. I didn't write that law. I don't even know how long this law been on the books.
Hey, Marlon, and doesn't that sound real similar to today?
Yes, that's why I'm bringing it up.
I don't like them laws. I don't like them. No, not them right there. No.
These are the strong. These are the people who Constitution, the strong Constitution. What's in the Constitution? Oh, no.
Law and order. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No. What was written? That must have been in the fine print. I don't like that one. I don't like. As a matter of fact, you know what? Constitution, Constitution. The Constitution is just. Let's just go ahead and get rid of the whole doggone thing now. As a matter of fact, let's go one step further. You know, the part I kept telling everybody that the Constitution was literally written as a living, breathing entity, which means they wrote it so vaguely. The founding fathers wrote it so vaguely because it must have been updated every 7 years as time went on. That's literally one of the smartest things that they actually did was, hey, how we write things now ain't going to be the same when we long gone and buried. So y'all need to update this document as time goes on.
No, but we got to be original constitutionalists. We're gonna go back.
Constitutionalists, no. We got to go back to the original. Except for that one. Well, except for that one too.
No, I like that one. No, that one right there.
That was cool.
Yeah. Wait, Second Amendment. Second Amendment.
Keep that one, bro.
Let's keep that one, but we're gonna change the words a little bit. Yeah, come on, man. That's why, like, when people get to talking, it's usually these libertarians or racists or anybody who's just trying to shroud the thing to maintain a certain aspect. They'll warp the text to fit the moment, right? And personally, if you want to warp the text to fit the moment to give people more rights, then I probably won't say too much. But when you warping it to take away something, that's when I have a problem, right? So why is it's okay to look backwards for these things, but we can't look backwards for another thing? It's just, first of all right, in summation, I am not going to dictate the daily life that I live based on people who did not understand toilet tissue or indoor plumbing while they were alive. You can take that to whatever text you want. If they did not have indoor plumbing and they still thought that mental illness was a curse from beyond, I don't really want to know what they think about how I live my life. I'm just going, hey, man.
Ella, you got anything? Because I ain't had nothing to that one. Nope. He's not lying, but
I think we're pretty good. Yeah,
still wiping your butt with leaves in the woods, and I'm supposed to think that you know what's best for me and my family today? Are you crazy? I bet if you went back in time and asked them some of these questions, they'd be like, why are you asking me? What is that magic thing on your wrist? Oh, witchcraft.
You You could talk to people that are not in the same state as you.
There are snakes on your feet holding your shoes on.
Oh boy.
Boy, I don't lie to you, boy. We show them an airplane. Them people running for the hills, nigga.
Oh, it's a wrap. No, that
No,
dude, everybody who get off the plane is a god. Everybody who get off the plane is a god. Every last one of them. You know, the dude who's in the back, you know, sleep the whole trip. He get off the plane, he's a god all of a sudden. It would just be wild. It would be wild.
Cars.
And as a
Anyway, we'll be going on and on. But so Thea's in summary saying people who don't even wipe their butt, but you want to listen to them. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to the trial.
Anyway, the case went to trial in 1847 before a Missouri judge whose name was Alexander Hamilton, but not the Alexander Hamilton. And I checked his family tree, and as far as I can tell, this judge, Alexander Hamilton in St. Louis, he has no actual relation to the Alexander Hamilton. Anyway, the way these freedom claims worked is the enslaved person had to claim that they were being falsely imprisoned by their enslaver. And to do that, they had to show that the enslaver treated them as slaves. So in the initial trial, they did this by bringing forth a guy named Sam Russell, who testified that he had hired Dred and Harriet from Irene and paid her father, Alexander Sandford, because women couldn't, make contracts or touch money, However, then Irene's defense was like, no, not so. And on cross-exam, it was revealed that Sam Russell's wife, Adeline, was actually the one who made the arrangements to hire Dred and Harriet from Irene. Sam had just paid her dad. And that one piece of testimony Sam had given, that he hired Dred and Harriet, was dismissed as hearsay, because the testimony was really, my wife hired them, which would require his wife to then come and testify that she was the one who did it in order for it to be admissible. I'm not sure why they didn't consider that, or know that, or include Adeline as a witness. Probably because women's brains can't really handle, giving witness testimony, Anyway, so on this technicality, the Scots lawyers didn't properly prove that Irene, the enslaver they were suing, held the Scots out as her own enslaved people. So the jury found for Irene. This is something that happens all the time in our legal system. The root of the issue is never even touched upon. It's just technicalities that decide a lot of lawsuits. But at the same time, technicalities like hearsay are important rules of evidence that are put in place to keep the system fair and the standards for evidence high. So it's a tricky subject. Anyway, the Scots managed to get a retrial, but then there were years of delays before the retrial was able to happen. The issue was brought all the way up to the Missouri Supreme Court, but by that point, the trial court had already granted the new trial. So the Supreme Court was like, this is moot. The retrial was already granted. Then before the retrial could happen, it was delayed several times due to the court being backed up. Then a huge fire broke out in St. Louis, so it got delayed again. Then a major cholera outbreak delayed the proceedings even further. So remember, this lawsuit was initiated in 1846. The retrial wasn't heard until 1850. And all they had to do in this retrial was present the facts again, but this time have Adeline testify that she was the one who hired them from Irene to prove that they were actually being held as slaves. That's it. An hour or two of testimony, but it took 4 years to get it right. And this time the jury found for the Scots because they proved that they were being held as slaves even though they'd traveled to free states and territories, and firmly held Missouri precedent said that that made them free.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm finna break my own rule real quick of no cuss in the first hour, but it's a small cuss word. It's not inflammatory cuss word. It's a small cuss word. He didn't hire her. His wife hired her. So that means we don't know what the hell did they do? Let's look at the actions. You act like they invited the Scots in for tea and cookies. Were they servants? Were they out in the field? Were they getting paid for any of these services? What do that gives you? I mean, come on, y'all. Come on. Y'all
Sorry.
Good. Y'all can't mess with me about the Super Bowl anymore.
No, what you did was worse.
but But let's just be real. Come on, y'all playing semantics about who hired who, and different. You know what it was about, and you're trying to play like I didn't hire them. My wife hired them. Oh, so these two black people that showed up in your house, you ain't question that? All of a sudden they're doing services in your house. You didn't question that? You just like, oh, well, since you're here, come on, y'all. Let's. But go ahead.
Trying to make sense out of evil.
I know. Oh, I have to show these two things real quick. Things we would show them in the future. Rap music. I wouldn't even go as far as rap music. Just go rock and roll.
Yeah, I remember these are the same people who thought rock and roll was like sending their children to the devil. So,
show them who Obama became, and that was yeah. That's gonna mess their head up for real. Slave is a president? Is. Remember, they're back in the day. Now, a slave is a president? Yeah. But anyway, go ahead, Theo.
But don't worry, it took him being half white to be president too. And his daddy couldn't come from America either.
Oh, and don't worry about it. It still took us another century.
Yeah.
So, you got anything, Anna?
There are a lot of really sick people out there. That's it.
Talk about then or now or the same?
Yeah. And both. Mm-hmm.
All right, let's keep the train moving. Of course, we had to have an appeal.
Obviously, Irene appealed this decision, and it was appealed up to the Missouri Supreme Court in 1851. At this point, Irene's appeal had the major issues laid out that would eventually make their way to the Supreme Court. They argued a number of things, but most importantly, they argued that the United States Congress's prohibitions against slavery in the free territories were unconstitutional. So this made the case bigger than just were the Scots in free territory and still being held as slaves and should therefore be free. Instead, it became, can the United States Congress grant freedom to enslaved people, or is that beyond the scope of what the Constitution allows Congress to do? Because you see, enslaved people were seen as simple property, just like any other piece of property. So the argument, in oversimplified and horrific terms, was that the Constitution didn't give Congress the right to take away people's property, and it certainly didn't allow other state laws to take away people's property. Like if you drove your horse and buggy from Missouri to Illinois, but in Illinois owning a horse and buggy was outlawed, Illinois couldn't seize your horse and buggy once you went back to Missouri. That's how they saw it. And the Missouri Supreme Court reversed the lower court decision and found for Irene and against the Scots. The constitutionality wasn't decided at this juncture, but instead the justices decided that all the precedent that had come before that allowed enslaved people to become free, well, it hadn't considered Missouri's laws in that. It was just based on laws in other states and territories. So instead, they said now your slavery status reattached upon re-entering Missouri, with the opinion stating that slavery was the will of God and that times now are not as they were when the former decisions on this subject were made, which basically admitted that racial and sectional prejudices influenced this decision.
You know, like this is great that we having the historical look back, but I'm trying to force myself to continue to focus on through lines and things like that. So as you learn more and more about this, it becomes a lot clearer, at least to me, why America decided that the slaves, those who were enslaved, could not be permitted to learn to read or write. Because had that prohibition not been in place, See, it's very hard to, you can control a person's body. It's very hard to control their mind. So when I say this, this is where this is coming from, because like to this day, I am that type of black person who would tell you, I follow the laws, so to speak, but I don't even follow them with any cognizant awareness of what they are for the most part. I will follow a law that I do not outwardly oppose, but I do not hold myself subject to any of these laws, not a single one. I am held to my standards. Fortunately, my standards fit comfortably within most of the established laws. But let me be encountered by one that I certainly oppose or do not agree with, I will fight. I will fight. And I say that because as long as you can keep people ignorant of the law, yet subject to the law, they will accept a bondage placed on them that has no authority outside of what someone has arbitrarily called a law. If you were to reinstate slavery as a law, that's your law. It's not my law. Now, I'm going to be subject to what happens as a consequence of me violating your law, but I don't accept it, and I'll fight you to the death. So this is why they kept the slaves from actually learning some of these things, because they did not want to face those repercussions. You can't get to court if you don't know the courts exist. You can't fight for your rights if you don't know what paperwork to fill out. It's really hard to find an advocate when you're not allowed to look a white man in the eye. Right? So I say that to you, brothers and sisters and people out there, just keep that kind of stuff in mind. If they pass a law tomorrow and say that nobody can have a weapon, then they just need to come see about me, because I'm going to have mine. You got to decide for yourself where you stand. And people back then did not have a choice, because the system was already in place. And they used various tactics. What we're witnessing here with Dred Scott and his family is one aspect of it, to keep people disjointed and having to fight by themselves. And so long as you're having to fight by yourself, it's really hard to do anything. But if you can come together, you can make some things happen. But yeah, and this thing, they say that this is one of the worst, if not the worst, Supreme Court decision in history. Personally, I don't really know a lot of the decisions in history. I'm willing to bet there were some really, really bad ones back then. Real bad ones. But F them laws, man. All of them. I'm done.
I like what she said. I mean, man, this is not no backwards, backward compliment, backhanded compliment, or something like that. But when she equated African Americans, black slaves in America, as horse and buggies, because that's how they saw it. Property. You cannot take my property. I don't care even if you don't allow slavery in this state. Once we cross back into a state that does do slavery, you can't take it back.
Reciprocity, is that the word? Reciprocity laws? Kind of like what we do right now with handguns. Oh, I can't have one here, but can I have it when I go into Alabama?
It is just so. I'm sorry. Every time I go deeper into the history of America, and you people know who you people are, it sits there and go, it's a long time ago and it wasn't as bad, and you're making a big deal about it, and one moron out there, you're spreading hate. I'm sorry, I'm spreading hate by reporting American history. Do you
But
see? Do you see how that sounds, dude?
They don't.
Do you understand what you just said? Me reporting accurate American history is spreading hate.
Yeah. They're
You
so
said
lost, bro. They're so lost, bro, that they'll say, well, I wouldn't have a problem with American history if you just would leave your interpretations out of it, as though history was just a series of dots on the map. But even if we just taught them as isolated incidents, one incident and then this incident and then this incident, you still have the exact same objection because the storyline will tell itself. It'll be created all by itself. We just walk on down the line. But this is why it's so important to not just learn the history, but to apply the history to time itself. When you stop and you look at it, America started on genocide of the indigenous people, started by dehumanizing people. The indigenous people were the Holocaust against the indigenous people was running roughly 400 years, right? Then you have, when they got done with that, they shifted to us. That's another 260 something years, I believe it is. Then they weren't done. They went with the Chinese Exclusion Act. They went with Jim Crow. So that's another 150 years. America has been the closest it's ever gotten to a democracy for roughly 60 years now. So that means the attitude against humanity is far longer than the attitude pro humanity and decency. So that's why we're having such headwinds, because the people who believe in this stuff, they're not a small number of people. And that's also, when you take history and look at current as well, why reparations is such a sticky issue, specifically when it comes to us. Because after slavery, they paid reparations to slave owners, right? Human traffickers got compensated, okay? After the Japanese internment, they had reparations. Coming out of the loose term Indian, but indigenous Americans and the treaties, they got reparations. The only group they don't want to give reparations to is the same people that they went tooth and nail and fought a war to deny their humanity. You just got to look at it. You just got to look at it. And yes, history's going to make you mad. I need for current events to make you mad too.
And let me just add this, and then I'll leave it up to Anna to close us out. Please, please, please stop using the argument of it was a long time ago. That was a long time ago. You know, America loved to do this thing where they know the atrocities that happened. And I'm thinking of present time too. Pretty sure it was just, been, fixed over the centuries or so. But you do an atrocity, and then you slow down the clock. So while you slow down the clock of justice happening, that's what helps your argument of it was a long time ago. That was a long time ago. So stop saying that it's a long time ago crap. You're purposely trying to make it, you're trying to run the clock out. So it becomes less and less of a sting. Because then when you run the clock out, it's not as fresh in people's minds. They move on to different subjects. Something else happens and they move on to different thought process. And then after a while, when you realize that you done ran the clock out a little bit more, now the facts getting kind of blurry. Did you really see what you saw? Did you really hear what you heard? Oh, more things came out. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that because you like to you also like to add this to it. More things came out, but we don't. You don't want to talk about that. So that's why I ignore you when you go, that was a long time ago. Well, yeah, but the event still happened though. So what's your point? I'm not going to get over something to make you feel better about yourself. I'm not going to stop reporting these things and going down history and everything else to make you feel good about yourself. That's not me. If you want to feel good about yourself, go read a self-help book. Go watch the whole episodes of Oprah. That ain't what this show is for. If you want me to stop reporting because, ooh, I feel, and it feels like they call it, I feel icky. I don't want to feel icky. So stop reporting. I ain't. And you can't make me. So, last word to Anna for an hour.
I just wanted to give a thank you to Lisa Miller, the one who did that video. She has some incredible content. She is a lawyer, so she helps break things down and feed it to you in digestible bits. So that's basically.
Hey, oh, goodness, think of it. Just slipped out my head.
We're gonna do the rest tomorrow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
New topic.
That went fast because like
it really did. And we got 4 more videos. We're not nearly done. We're not nearly done. And I knew this. I knew it was going to be a 2-parter. So I'm trying to give Thea's time to think about what he was going to say. So I'm running out of stuff to say. So
I gave up.
I don't know. I thought we would get to the decision.
Nope. Cliffhanger.
But all right.
Oh, I was gonna say, Mr. Beat also did a video. If you like his delivery a little better, yeah, hers was good. They covered the same information, but it's just different, delivery style. Oh, and then your friend that had your video pulled down, he did one too.
Yeah,
Mr. Slow Talker, Mr. Slow Talker, yeah.
So
I watched a few videos on it, and
I can't show it. So
young Ben Carson.
that's a bit.